Adolf Hitler. You've never seen him like this before. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth in Braunau to his death in the bunker, authentically flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler? Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, starting an inferno that engulfed the world and brought death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Fascinating and oppressive accounts from companions, friends, and enemies, as well as the most extensive collection of archive material ever shown. Much of it, hitherto unpublished, reveal who Hitler was and how he could become what he was. A notorious liar and an unscrupulous murderer. After the death of his strict father and beloved mother, Hitler lives as a layabout in Vienna, with no school graduation and twice rejected by the Academy of Arts. Living in a men's shelter, he paints postcards to bolster his small orphan's pension. In order to avoid being called up for military service in Austria, Hitler moves to Munich in Germany. As World War I begins, Hitler volunteers for the Bavarian army and becomes a German soldier and an ardent patriot. For the first time, he feels that he belongs somewhere and has a normal life. At the end of the war, Hitler does not know what to do next.
On June the 30th, 1903, the 72-year-old Kaiser Franz Josef I visits Braunau am Inn to celebrate its 700th birthday. In a historical coincidence, this border town to Bavaria of all places is the origin of the oldest film footage shot by an Austrian cinematographer.
In the late 80s of the last century, my parents lived in this small town on the Inn, which is Bavarian by blood and Austrian by nationality. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The worst disaster to strike the town of Braunau occurred on March the 28th, 1874. A violent storm fanned a terrible fire that destroyed 120 buildings. This stroke of fate was a pivotal moment in the history of Braunau. Konrad Meindl, History of Braunau am Inn, 1882.
"15 years later, Adolf, the youngest son of the customs inspector Alois Hitler, who worked in Braunau and Simbach, was born. Eduard Kriechbaum, History of Braunau am Inn, 1938.
A terrible disaster for hundreds of millions of people worldwide. The customs inspector and his family occupy a small apartment on the top floor of the Pommer Hotel in Braunau. At Easter time on April the 20th, 1889, at about 6:30 in the evening, Adolf Hitler is born.
Parish Register, Braunau. Adolf Hitler, born on April the 20th, 1889, at 6:30 in the evening. Baptized on April the 22nd at 3:15 by Ignaz Probst.
To begin with, there is this picture of little Adolf from the year 1889, a few months after his birth. One thing worthy of note in this first picture of Hitler is the close resemblance of Adolf to his mother. August Kubizek, childhood friend of Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler is the third of the couple's 6 children. He and his younger sister Paula are the only ones to survive beyond childhood. The mother is 28 years old at the time of the birth. The father is 51. Clara Hitler is related to Alois Hitler. She's her husband's second cousin.
Until she became his wife, Alois Hitler called her his cousin without further ado. Even though Clara Pölzl was only a second cousin, the bride and groom needed a church dispensation to marry. August Kubitschek.
The history of film as a medium also begins in Hitler's childhood. When Hitler is 3 years old, his father is transferred to a new post and decides to move into an apartment in Passau on the German side of the border. Adolf Hitler lives with his family in Bavaria for 3 years, until 1895.
Actually, Hitler didn't speak a typical Austrian dialect. August Kubitschek.
In my youth, my German was the dialect spoken in Lower Bavaria. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The oldest film recording made in Austria-Hungary was shot by foreigners, the Lumiere brothers. It shows Vienna, the capital of a multinational empire, in the year 1896.
In old Austria, you could travel without a passport, from the Mediterranean, over the Alps, way into the east, the west, and the north. Oskar Kokoschka, painter and writer.
Hitler's ancestry from Lower Austria, as well as a total of 21 years spent in Upper Austria and Vienna, do not suffice to make him Austrian in the sense of a citizen of that nation.
Kurt Schuschnigg, Austrian Chancellor from 1934 to 1938. Austrians who spoke about the nation before 1938 meant the national culture that extended beyond their borders, which is what Austrian man also identified with.
This cultural nation is Germany. Transporting a locomotive through the streets of Chemnitz, 16 workhorses pull the locomotive as the factory has no rail connection. The majority of German-speaking Austrians feel close links to the Germans in Prussia, Saxony, Bavaria, and the smaller federal states already united in a partly industrialized Reich.
He was a grumpy, reticent old man, and, like a lot of political free spirits at the time, a stern German nationalist. Josef Meyerhofer, farmer in the village of Leonding by Linz.
A visit to his parents' grave. His school friends say his mother was loving and kind-hearted. The father cold, silent and strict. Josef Goebbels, diary, July 22nd, 1938.
In June 1939, Eva Braun films the small farm in the village of Haarfeld in Upper Austria that Hitler's father leases after retiring early in 1895. On May 1, 1895, Hitler starts school in a one-room schoolhouse in the neighboring village of Fischelham. After school, he plays popular games of the period.
Playing only war games for us boys became boring, but he always found someone to play with. Balduin von Wellering, schoolmate of Hitler.
In the year 1897, Hitler's father sells the farm in Haarfeld. The family lives temporarily in the small town of Lambach.
Adolf Hitler's parents bought house number 61 with adjacent plots of land in Leonding on November the 14th, 1898. Their son Adolf had just turned 10 years old. Max Sixtel, Leonding, the Führer's hometown Linz, 1938.
I never loved my father, but feared him all the more. Adolf Hitler, Table Talk, recorded by his secretary, Christa Schroeder.
My brother Adolf provoked my father to such extremes that he was beaten every day. Paula Hitler, later Paula Wolf.
Pictures from Hitler's school years are always shots of the whole class. You can still remember what it was like. August Kubitschek.
Adolf Hitler lives in Leonding near Linz for about 8 years. He attends the 4th and 5th grades here.
In his stories, his youth played a big part. He was a poor student. Albert Speer, the Kranzberg Protocol.
After 5 years at elementary school, in 1900, Adolf Hitler, aged 11, begins secondary school in the city of Linz. Adolf Hitler has to repeat his first year at secondary school due to poor grades.
I remember the scrawny, pale boy who commuted every day between Linz and Leonding fairly well. He was definitely talented on the one hand, but was not in control of himself. He was considered rebellious, and he didn't work hard.
Dr. Edward Hümer, Hitler's French teacher.
At the secondary school in Linz, there is a strident, widespread pan-German nationalism among the teachers. They want to join the united, strong German Reich of Bismarck, who is greatly admired.
Adolf was a great fan of Bismarck, classmate of Hitler's.
The quiet life enjoyed by the Hitler family on its little patch of land only lasted a few years. The head of the family died unexpectedly of a heart attack in January 1903. Max Sixtel, Leonding, the Führer's hometown.
Alois Hitler leaves his modest savings to his 4 surviving children, Alois and Angela from the second of his 3 marriages, and Adolf and Paula. This inheritance is to be paid out when they come of age.
The quiet cemetery of Leonding was his final resting place. His widow moved to the nearby city of Linz for the better educational opportunities for her children. Max Sixtel.
Linz, the capital of Upper Austria, is located 264 meters above sea level on the right bank of the Danube. 2 steel bridges connect the town to Uefa on the other side. Linz has 58,791 mostly German and Catholic residents. Meyer's Great Encyclopedia, Leipzig, 1908.
The tone of society was determined by the business community, the bureaucracy, and the military. If you wanted to be seen, you met in the evening for a stroll on the high street, which significantly was called Country Road. August Kubitschek.
Although this nonsense also exists in other countries, racial ideology, and with it anti-Semitism, had its center of power in Old Austria. In contrast to Vienna, in Western Austria there were hardly any Jews. Karl Tippmann, German-Austrian dramatist.
At school, I met a Jewish boy. whom we all treated with caution, but only because we didn't trust his silence. I didn't think anything of it, nor did the others. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
In a coincidence of history, in 1903, two students at Linz Secondary School posed for a photo. A few decades later, in professional life, they will become infamous and famous. Adolf Hitler is only a few days older than the factory owner's son of Jewish descent from Vienna. Ludwig Wittgenstein is 2 years ahead of Hitler in school. He later becomes a philosopher and one of the pioneers of the logical positivism and the analytic philosophy of language movements. In 1906, Wittgenstein begins his studies in Berlin. In 1904, Clara Hitler has to send her son Adolf, who due to bad grades is again in danger of not moving upper class, to the state secondary school in Steyr, 40 kilometers away.
Look at my school grades. I had bad marks in German. That idiot of a professor spoiled the German language for me. I would never be able to write a proper letter. Adolf Hitler, in the Führer's headquarters, 1943. Last grades at secondary school in Steyr. Diligence, inconsistent. German, insufficient. Geography and history, sufficient. Mathematics, insufficient. Physics, satisfactory. Freehand drawing, commendable. Sport, excellent.
I don't have a photograph of Adolf Hitler during the years of our friendship. There probably aren't any photos of Hitler during this period. Everything that could be said about images of Hitler as a young man has already been said, were it not for the drawing by a classmate from the 4th grade of the junior high school in Steyr. By chance, this drawing, done in 1905, was preserved. The boy could only draw profiles. Nevertheless, there is something peculiarly fascinating about this pencil sketch. August Kubitschek.
After 9 years, Adolf Hitler finishes school without graduating. For the following 3 years, he lives in Linz on his mother's pension, not really doing anything.
All of his relatives considered him worthless, a person who shied away from any gainful employment from the start. August Kubitschek.
Clara Hitler lives with her stepdaughter Angela, her son Adolf and her 12-year-old daughter Paula in an apartment in Urfahr on the north bank of the Danube in Linz. Film is the most modern medium of the time, but Adolf Hitler is keen on architecture and opera. Vienna is the world capital of music.
In the years when I was growing up, everything in music was fermentation and rebirth, with Gustav Mahler at the center. Vicky Baum, student at the Vienna Academy of Music.
Adolf Hitler talks his mother into allowing him to travel to Vienna. He wants to apply for admission to the general painting class at the Academy of Fine Arts.
From early in the morning to late at night, I ran from one sightseeing attraction to the next. But the buildings were the only things that fascinated me. All of Ring Street affected me like a spell from the Arabian Nights. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
From 1904 to 1908, I was Adolf Hitler's only friend in Linz, and thereafter in Vienna. August Kubitschek.
Postcard to August Kubitschek, May the 7th, 1906. I've arrived safely and am seeing all the sights. Tomorrow I'm going to the opera to see Tristan. The day after tomorrow, the Flying Dutchman, etc. Although I find everything really beautiful here, I miss Linz very much. Greetings from your friend, Adolf Hitler.
Hitler, who later, in the opinion of a few art experts, was not entirely untalented, manages to pass the first selection, but is turned down after the second.
Adolf Hitler, born in Braunau, Upper Austria, on April the 20th, 1889. German, Catholic, few faces, test drawing unsatisfactory. Classification list of the general painting class.
When Adolf Hitler, disappointed by the rejection, returns to his family in Linz after 8 weeks, Clara Hitler is struck down with a serious illness. She's suffering from a swelling. Nowadays, it would be diagnosed as cancer. For several months, Adolf Hitler devotedly takes care of his mother at home.
Dr. Bloch, well loved by all, was the Hitler family physician. August Kubitschek.
To a great degree, the boy lived in his own world. I have no idea what dreams he dreamt. Dr. Edward Bloch, Jewish physician of the Hitler family.
Clara Hitler dies in the night of December the 21st, 1907, surrounded by her family. In 1940, Adolf Hitler will allow his Jewish family doctor and his wife Lily to emigrate to the United States.
The death of our mother had a great effect on me and Adolf. We were very attached to our mother. When she died, Adolf stopped coming home. Paula Hitler, Adolf Hitler's sister.
Vienna was the heart of the monarchy. This is where the last life of the sick, old body of the rotting Reich ebbed away. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Many, like me, dreamed that later in life they would make their home in the imperial city. Mannes Sperber, Austrian-French writer.
A grey city, wonderfully grey, like Paris, like every one of these very old European cities. Vicky Baum, writer.
In contrast to what Hitler's sister Paula claims later, Adolf Hitler remains in Linz several weeks after the death of his mother. He never tells his family or his friend Kubitschek that he failed the admissions test the previous year.
Apparently, he was having some really bad days. He was easily irritated and gave me short shrift when I started to talk about my studies. August Kubitschek.
In the spring of 1908, Adolf Hitler begins living the life of a wastrel in the metropolis.
Vienna was the most thorough education of my life. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The small inheritance that was diligently managed by his guardian had to cover both the cost of living and his studies. He may have been able to supplement his income through the sale of drawings and paintings. August Kubitschek.
Adolf Hitler had convinced his friend's parents to allow their son to study music in Vienna.
Dear friend, I'm eagerly awaiting word on your visit. Write soon so that I can prepare the festivities. All of Vienna is waiting. Adolf Hitler.
Our living conditions were extremely modest. For a long time, I couldn't get out of him where he ate for lunch. My question would be gruffly brushed aside. August Kubitschek.
In Vienna, Hitler shares an apartment with Kubitschek and prepares for a second attempt to get into the Academy of Art.
The Führer knew the Viennese well. They're a disgusting pack, made up of a mixture of Poles, Czechs, Jews, and Germans. Joseph Goebbels, diary.
He loved Vienna, but not the Viennese. That's how I describe his attitude. August Kubitschek.
In 1910, there were more than 175,000 practicing Jews living in Vienna. According to the criteria of racial anti-Semitism, which refers solely to ancestry regardless of the practice of religion, the number of Jews is much higher.
I am now fairly sure that Vienna was the most anti-Semitic city that I've ever lived in. Egon Schwartz, Viennese Jew.
Hitler was by no means a Jew hater in those days. Reinhold Hannisch, Hitler's housemate in the Brigittenau men's hostel.
At the time, the town's mayor was Dr. Karl Lueger, a lawyer, a passionate German nationalist, a known anti-Semite, and the founder of the Christian Social Party that represented people in German-speaking Austria.
Oh, in Vienna there are Jews like sand at the seaside. Everywhere nothing but Jews. Dr. Karl Lueger.
Karl Lueger dies on March the 9th, 1910 at the age of 65. His funeral is reportedly the most beautiful such ceremony in Viennese history.
Karl Lueger was the role model from whom he learned the effectiveness of anti-Semitic agitation. Stefan Zweig, Austrian writer, The World of Yesterday.
As the huge funeral procession of the deceased mayor moved from the town hall to Ringstrasse, I too found myself among the many hundreds of thousands watching the funeral procession.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf. With his catchphrase, "We have to help the little man," Karl Lueger captivated the entire lower class and the frustrated middle class with it. The same social classes that Adolf Hitler later assembled around him. Stefan Zweig.
I came to know the man and the movement. I see in the man today, more than ever before, the most powerful German mayor of all time.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
As Hitler watches the funeral, many months have passed since his last contact with his friend Kubitschek. For the next months, there is no trace of Hitler's activities in Vienna. He's broken off contact with his family, and he fails the second entrance test at the Art Academy.
I was a young, inexperienced man, without any means of support, forced to get by on my own. The few kronen, often only cents, from the proceeds of my work were barely enough to pay for my bed and board.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Hitler probably also went hungry and stayed in community hostels. He begins to copy street views of Vienna from books and then sells them as postcards.
And yet, in one respect, the bleakness of my surroundings didn't bother me. In my mind, I spent these years living in palaces.
Adolf Hitler, monologue in the Führer's headquarters.
In London, a member of parliament who was raised in a palace is concerned about the fulfillment of his dream. He expresses this in a letter.
Do you know, I would greatly like to have some practice in the handling of large forces. I am sure I have the root of the matter in me, but never, I fear, in this state of existence, will it have a chance of flowering in bright red bloom. Winston Churchill.
Hitler's share of his father's inheritance is paid out on April the 20th, 1913, his 24th birthday. Hitler met Rudolf Häusler in a men's hostel. With him, he wants to move to the German city of Munich.
He was just full of praise for this city.
And at the same time, he didn't forget the large beer gardens and radishes, etc. Housemate of Hitler's in 1912.
The main reason for leaving Austria is probably that the later Commander-in-Chief Adolf Hitler wants to get out of doing military service. On Saturday, May the 24th, 1913, Hitler and Häusler give notice of departure to the police, but don't state where they plan to live.
I had arrived in this town as a boy and departed as a quiet and serious man. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
These are the years just before the outbreak of the First World War.
It would be wrong to label these adolescent days untarnished as the dawn of light, but the sun of a believable century was still shining. Mankind was still free of barbarism. One felt centuries superior to the demons of the Dark Ages. It was really a delight to be alive. Wilhelm Matthau, Königsberg, teacher's son.
It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon in spring. Someone knocked on the door and I answered it. It was a young man wanting to see the room we were renting. I showed it to him and we reached an agreement. Frau Anna Popp, landlady.
Adolf Hitler and Rudolf Häusler rent a room together from the tailor Popp at 34 Schleißheimer Straße, near the district of Schwabing. To avoid investigation by the Austrian military administration, Hitler declares himself stateless on his registration form.
Life in Munich was diverse, colourful and energetic, with rich opportunities for employment, activity and fun. It was a luxurious life. You lived cheaply and comfortably. Eugen Kalkschmidt, bookseller, memoirs.
Schwabing was full of eccentric people. All Munich learned to tolerate and enjoy the oddity of their existence. Erich Mühsam, German Jewish publicist.
In purely personal terms, Hitler liked the carefree artists of Schwabing. When I dig out my memory of a Schwabinger, he was really into it with his body and soul and laughed heartily. But on a political level, he rejected artistic folk. Heinrich Hoffmann, photographer, Munich.
In Munich, Adolf Hitler has found the city that is to become the centre of his life. He does, however, remain an outsider. His inheritance helps him build an uncertain yet adequate existence on the fringe of society.
In 1913, a young man came into the shop and offered me an aquarelle of the Munich residential palace. I liked the painting and I bought several pictures from the young Hitler. As I recall, I paid him 15 to 20 marks for a painting, depending on its execution. Otto Paul Kerber, goldsmith and gem cutter.
Usually around 4:30 in the afternoon, Hitler came into the bakery and always bought the same thing. A slice of braided sweet white bread for 5 pfennigs. Then he went across the street to Dairyman Huber and bought half a litre of milk. That was his dinner. Franz Heilmann, baker, Munich.
The younger generation that we belonged to didn't know anything about war, but were intoxicated by foreign wars. We had no real idea what war was. Adolf's father had never been a soldier. Now and again, old men would talk about Königgrätz and Kostotze. August Kubitschek.
Diary, Friday, June the 26th, 1914. Each day goes by just like the last. The children are well. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia. Diary, Monday, June the 29th, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir apparent to the Austrian throne, has been killed along with his wife. The scum of moral turpitude. Henrietta Schneider.
The incident triggers a war in the Balkans that grows to become a world war.
In the summer of 1914, I was at a spa in Wiesbaden. Day after day, you could see how war psychosis was spreading through the population. Gustav Mannerheim, colonel of the Russian Imperial Army of Finnish-Swedish origin.
Diary, Sunday, July the 26th, 1914. The fear of war is again evident. Dispatches told us that war has broken out between Serbia and Austria because Serbia doesn't want to fulfill the demands of Austria. Henrietta Schneider.
Letter, July the 30th, 1914. Cat, dear, it is all up. Germany has quenched the last hopes of peace by declaring war on Russia, and the declaration against France is momentarily expected. The world has gone mad, and we must look after ourselves and our friends. Sweet cat, my tender love, kiss the kittens. Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, to his wife Clementine.
Diary, August the 2nd, 1914. Germany has declared war on Russia. Swimming classes in the afternoon. Franz Kafka, Prague, insurance clerk.
For me, those hours were a release from the annoying emotions of youth. I'm not ashamed to say today that I was overwhelmed with enthusiasm, fell to my knees and thanked the heavens with all my heart that they'd given me the good fortune to live in this era.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The German Reich has an imperial fleet, but no army of its own. 21 of the 24 German federal states send their recruits to Prussian regiments. The kingdoms of Bavaria, Saxony, and Württemberg deploy their own armies. The Austrian citizen Hitler, unwilling to do military service there, will join the Royal Bavarian Army, although this is actually only permitted to citizens of the German Reich. On August 2nd, 1914, the day after Germany declares war on Russia, there is a big patriotic rally on Odeonsplatz in front of the Feldherrn Hall.
On August the 5th, 1914, I enlisted in the army on a request to His Majesty and entered the 1st Bavarian Infantry Regiment. I was deferred for several days, then transferred to the 2nd Infantry Regiment, and finally assigned to the Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment No. 16 on August the 16th.
Adolf Hitler, outline of my person.
Heinrich Hoffmann photographs the ceremony. Years later, in an enlargement, he discovers a face among the masses, which is presumably Hitler's.
There were younger and older men, the so-called substitute reservists. We had companies that comprised up to 60% one-year volunteers. Helmets, at that time the pointed Kaiser helmets, weren't available. As a start, we marched out wearing the charcoal cap, provided for the National Guard. Fritz Wiedemann, 2nd Lieutenant, Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment 16.
The regiment is named the List Regiment, after its first commander, Colonel Julius List. For the first time in his life, Adolf Hitler wears a uniform. Hitler's landlady reports that he came to her on Friday, August the 9th, 1914, to say goodbye.
He took my husband by the hand and said,
"If I die, would you please write to my sister? Maybe she'd like to have my few possessions. If not, you can keep them. I'm sorry if I've caused you any difficulties."
He shook my hand as well as I stood there crying. We were all so fond of him. Anna Popp, landlady to Adolf Hitler in Munich.
Hitler's personnel files show an objective picture of a courageous, well-behaved soldier who was twice wounded or injured by mustard gas. He saw military action from beginning to end and was highly decorated for his bravery. Report of the Bavarian War Archive, October the 13th, 1924.
He served 4 years in the same regiment, with only short breaks, and took part in nearly all the battles. Fritz Wiedemann, 2nd Lieutenant.
In the early morning hours of October the 21st, 1914, Hitler's regiment sets out from Munich station in a westerly direction. Later in the year 1924, Adolf Hitler reads a draft of his book Mein Kampf to Rudolf Hess, his cellmate in Landsberg prison.
He talks about deployment and the ride along the Rhine. The train with the young volunteer regiment winds its way past the Niederwald Memorial. The song The Watch on the Rhine resonates from the lips of the boys. Rudolf Hess, letter to Ilse Proel.
On the morning of October the 23rd, the regiment crosses the Belgian border and by the evening reaches the northern French town of Lille.
From a distance, we heard the monotonous sound of our heavy mortars. We dismounted and lounged around the rifle pyramids. Shortly before midnight, we finally marched into the town itself. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
In the Battle of Flanders, a quarter of the soldiers from Hitler's regiment are killed. If Hitler had spent the final 4 years of the war in the trenches, the chances of his survival would have been very low. Shortly after the first combat mission of the List Regiment, Hitler is promoted to Lance Corporal. He will reject further promotions during the course of the war. This would have involved an attachment to other army units, and Hitler would have lost the camaraderie and security of the regimental family.
For the first time, Hitler was part of a bigger community, and with that came the order and structure that spared him the daily struggle to survive. Fritz Wiedemann, Lieutenant.
As of November the 9th, Hitler is deployed as a dispatch runner and assigned to the regimental staff. His main task is to bring command messages to the various battalions of the regiment. In the eyes of many soldiers in the trenches, the staff orderlies behind the immediate front are privileged cowards.
All ordinary soldiers think that anyone from the regimental staff is a cowardly swine. It's also true, however, that it was better to be in the regimental staff than in the company. Adolf, we can't deny that we were in the regimental staff. These people think that no officer was ever hit by a rifle or a machine gun bullet. For them, anyone who didn't serve in the trenches didn't serve at all. Ferdinand Wittmann, musician, comrade of Adolf Hitler in the regimental staff, in a letter, 1932.
Hitler is respected by his comrades at regimental headquarters, but he remains an outsider. In 5 of 6 photos showing Hitler with his comrades, he's either standing or sitting to one side.
Diary, July the 7th, 1916. The English are also advancing, but the Germans are positioned well in front of Verdun. Hoyer's terrible letter. His best friend is seriously wounded. Both arms torn off. Many others are dead. He writes that if he still had a mother, he would ask her to pray for him. Kita Kollwitz, painter and sculptress.
In early 1915, Adolf Hitler too is already disillusioned. As other comrades turn to alcohol or religion or lose their self-discipline, Hitler claims to have undergone a metamorphosis.
Whenever death was on the prowl, a certain something attempted to rebel and appeared to the weak body in the guise of reason, and was in fact only cowardice that was behind this disguise, trying to seduce the individual. By the winter of 1915-16, this battle was already decided for me. The will itself had finally become my complete master. Now fate could put me to the test without me losing my nerves. A young war volunteer had become an old soldier. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
On October 2nd, 1916, the regimental staff at Le Bac takes over a house with a fortified shelter.
You could hardly sit down. You tripped over comrades' legs. The air was thick and damp, almost suffocating. Balthasar Brandmeier, dispatch runner.
Hitler is wounded in the left thigh by British artillery shrapnel on October 5th, 1916.
Balthasar Brandmeier. I'd just taken a seat next to Hitler when a shell hit in the middle of the corridor. The ceiling was shattered into 1,000 pieces and the fragments went everywhere.
Fritz Wiedemann, Lieutenant. 6 dispatch runners were wounded. Among them was my messenger, Adolf Hitler. As I leaned over him, he said to me,
"It's not that bad, Lieutenant, sir. I'll stay with you, stay with the regiment."
Four days later, Hitler is taken to the Red Cross Hospital in Belitz, south of Berlin. By March 1st, 1917, he's back running dispatches in the regimental staff. In the following months, he participates in combat activities. On August 4th, 1918, Hitler is awarded the Iron Cross First Class, the highest military honour that soldiers of his rank in the Imperial German Army can receive. The nomination was submitted by a Jewish officer, Lieutenant Hugo Gutmann.
I never got out of Hitler the reason for his fanatical hatred of Jews. The experience with Jewish officers during the World War couldn't have contributed to this. Fritz Wiedemann, Lieutenant.
The only 2 military medals that Hitler will wear in the Third Reich are the Iron Cross and the Black Wound Badge from the First World War. The Western Front collapses on August 8th, 1918. As a result, General Ludendorff declares to Kaiser Wilhelm II on September the 29th that a military catastrophe is unavoidable. He asks the Kaiser to request a ceasefire with the Allies within 24 hours. An abrupt change in the posture of the Supreme Army Command from pretended confidence in victory to an admission of defeat. On September the 27th, 1918, Adolf Hitler returns to his regiment from leave. The day after, a British attack forces the regiment to abandon its position. In the night of October the 13th, Hitler's war service ends in a heavy British barrage.
The English pester the position, especially with gas, which leads to deplorable losses, including a large part of the regiment staff. History of the regiment, Munich, 1932.
Mustard gas was used. On a hill south of the city of Vervik, on October the 13th, we came under several hours of artillery fire with gas shells. Already around midnight, some of us dropped out, including some comrades permanently. In the morning, I too experienced pain that grew stronger every 15 minutes. And at 7 o'clock, I staggered and stumbled back with burning eyes, taking my last message of the war with me. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
After treatment in a mobile army hospital, Adolf Hitler is transported to the Prussian Reserve Hospital in Pasewalk, Western Pomerania. He's been on the front for 42 of the 51 months of the war. Hitler remains in Pasewalk for 28 days, during which the world changes.
It was not just young people marching up and down the streets. There were many who could not get over the defeat. And many others were unable to find their way back into normal working life because that world had disappeared or was falling apart, and there was no regular work, even if one was willing to work. George Gross, painter, his life told by himself.
In the military hospital in Pasewalk, Adolf Hitler and the other patients learn that a revolution has taken place, the monarchy abdicated, and a ceasefire been concluded.
Diary, Spa, November the 3rd, 1918. Bavaria has been declared a republic. Hinter announces that the Reichstag, except for the conservatives, demands the abdication of the Kaiser. His Majesty sharply refuses. Diary, Spa, November the 7th, 1918. We are now experiencing the blooming of Bolshevism in Germany. The Kaiser can now only sleep with the help of pills. Sigurd von Ilsermann, adjutant to Kaiser Wilhelm II.
Diary, Berlin, November the 9th, 1918. The Kaiser has abdicated. The revolution has triumphed in Berlin. Harry Graf Kessler, publicist and diplomat.
I hadn't cried since the day I stood by my mother's grave. Now, I couldn't stop myself. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Like everything else in Mein Kampf, this portrayal is a stylization and must be doubted. We don't know whether it was Hitler's will or merely coincidence that influenced his future course from then on.
But from that point on, I decided to become a politician. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Revolution breaks out in Munich on November the 7th, 1918, before the unrest reaches Berlin. The following day, the journalist and author Kurt Eisner, a left-wing member of the Social Democrats, proclaims a republic in Munich.
The Wittelsbach dynasty has been deposed. From now on, Bavaria is a free state. Kurt Eisner, Proclamation, November the 8th, 1918.
Instituted by workers and soldiers, a government of right and left-wing Social Democrats led by Kurt Eisner govern Munich and Bavaria for 100 days. Some members of his government are keen on introducing worker and peasant councils.
They didn't understand Eisner. How should they? There was no imperial Bavarian coziness, roughness, sloppiness, or bonhomie to him. He was an abstract moralist. Ricardo Huch, writer and historian, Munich.
On November the 21st, 1918, Adolf Hitler returns to Munich. He tries to evade demobilization and remain a soldier. As a Jew, Eisner is exposed to relentless anti-Semitic attacks from the very start. The campaign against him ends on February the 21st, 1919, when he is shot dead in the street in broad daylight by a former officer. The body of Kurt Eisner is escorted by a long funeral procession from Munich's Theresienwiese to the Ostfriedhof cemetery.
The proletariat wanted to turn Eisner's grave into a victory memorial. The gathering was said to have been enormous. Ricardo Huch.
Adolf Hitler accompanies the procession as a silent observer. He keeps his distance to the radical revolutionary forces, but as yet also to their right-wing opponents. There are clashes in the state capital between radical left-wing supporters of the workers' councils and parliamentary democracy. The parliamentary-oriented Social Democrat majority allows right-wing volunteer groups, the so-called Free Corps, to break the power of the workers' councils. Hitler, still a soldier, doesn't register with a right-wing corps, but instead remains in his barracks in Munich.
Letter to Clara and Fritz Hess. The volunteer corps made an excellent impression. Without them, we would have been finished in Bavaria. Rudolf Hess, student and member of the Free Corps.
All we knew was that one wind was blowing in from the east and another from the west, and that the storm was blowing all around the earth. But the capital of our new German Republic was also like a bubbling cauldron. You could not see who was heating the cauldron. You just saw him boiling cheerfully and felt the ever-increasing heat. All were hated: the Jews, the capitalists, the landowners, the communists, the military, the homeowners, the workers, the unemployed, the Black Reichswehr, the control commissions, the politicians, the department stores, and, once again, the Jews. It was an orgy of hate speech, and the Republic was weak, barely perceptible. That had to end in a terrible crash. George Gross.
In German society, there are distinct social environments, above all the broad-based but politically divided workers' movement.
The legacy of the Social Democratic Babel Party was great, with all their organizations, from the cradle to the grave, and belief in the future, which allowed one to forget the gloom of the present. Willy Brandt, born as Herbert Frahm in Lübeck, Memoirs.
At first, the emerging National Socialist movement couldn't break into the socialist and Catholic environments, and then only gradually. Up until the death of the charismatic politician Gustav Stresemann in October 1929, both social groups believe they can form a parliamentary majority in the German Reich, with the parties of the Protestant middle and upper classes.
Not every petty bourgeois can become a Hitler, but there is something of Hitler in every petty bourgeois. Leo Trotsky, communist revolutionary in Mexican exile.
Adolf Hitler's entry into politics has historical significance. It begins in Munich in the summer and autumn of 1919.
In the deeper layers of man, predatory forces lie dormant. Guards of lunatic asylums know this. If these forces are able to influence mass movements, this has effects like those created by Hitler. Arnold Zweig, German writer.
postcard to Clara and Fritz Hess. The one thing that keeps me going is the hope of revenge, even though it is still very far away. Rudolf Hess.
The war veteran Hitler feels less desire for revenge than contempt for the supposed traitors in the interior. In the second volume of Mein Kampf, he will voice the threat of wanting to execute several tens of thousands of so-called November criminals. The Reichswehr was created out of the armies of Imperial Prussia, Bavaria, Saxony and Württemberg. The Bavarian army becomes a melting pot for anti-republican forces. During this period, Hitler grows more radical. He is under the influence of army officers like Karl Mayr, the head of the intelligence battalion.
When I met him for the first time, he came across as a tired stray dog looking for an owner. Karl Mayr, captain of the Reichswehr.
Karl Mayr also finances patriotic parties like the Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, the German Workers' Party, which is founded in Munich on January the 5th, 1919, mainly by a group of railwaymen. Mayr observes his subordinate Hitler, discovers his ability to agitate, and assigns the corporal to attend a course at the Reichswehr camp at Lechfeld near Augsburg.
Karl Alexander von Müller, National Conservative Historian, Memoirs. At the end of my lecture, a small group came over. They seemed captivated by a man in their midst who spoke to them without interruption, in a strange guttural voice and with growing passion.
One day, I had the opportunity to talk to a large audience, and what I had always instinctively felt without knowing it turned out to be true. I could speak in public. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Herr Hitler is, I might say, a born people's orator, who, through his fanaticism and his popular presence in the gathering, compels his audience to listen and think. A soldier, camp at Lechfeld.
On September the 12th, 1919, Hitler, who has in the meantime been demobbed, is sent to spy on the German Workers' Party by Mayr, who also provides financial support.
During the discussion, a professor spoke about separatist views. A second speaker then took the floor and, in short, powerful words, demolished the professor. It was Adolf Hitler. Michael Lotter, secretary of the German Workers' Party.
In the second half of September 1919, Hitler joins the German Workers' Party and participates regularly in its meetings.
German Workers' Party, Munich chapter. We hereby request your presence at an assembly at the guest house, German Reich, on Wednesday, December the 10th, 1919 at 7 p.m. Speaker, Herr Hitler, on Germany in its deepest humiliation. The hall is heated. Josef Mayr, First Secretary.
Among the various right-wing radical organizations, the NSDAP was by no means the strongest, but it was the most active and cohesive group. Its significance is solely the result of the effect of Hitler as a speaker. Ernst Hanfstanger, born 1887, son of a publisher, acquaintance of Adolf Hitler from 1920.
The architectural painter Hitler sketches a party flag in the old Reich colours of black, red and white, with a swastika in the middle. This is a popular symbol in nationalist circles.
the swastika as a symbol of the work, the white as a sign of our national attitude, and the red as a sign of our true social thought. In the cross, however, there must be a deeper meaning, namely the spirit which signifies labour in this world, the spirit of the idealism of Aryanism, and not the spirit of the Jew. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Shortly after the Kampf Putsch, I saw someone scribbling strange figures in his notebook. A few strokes that could be shaped into a symmetrical, box-like ornament. I was tempted to do the same. "What is that?" I asked him in a whisper. "Anti-Semitic insignia." The Erhard troops wore them on their helmets. It means Jews out. You have to know this. Sebastian Hafner, author, Memoirs.
The swastika is found on prehistoric vessels and devices and is a Buddhist religious symbol in India. Meyer's Great Encyclopedia, 1888.
On February the 24th, 1920, Hitler speaks for the first time in front of more than 1,000 people at the Hofbräuhaus. He also presents the party's 25-point program, which is formally valid for a quarter of a century until the demise of the NSDAP.
First, we demand the unification of all Germans in a greater Germany based on the right of self-determination of the people. Second, we demand equal rights for the German people in respect to other nations and the abrogation of the peace treaties of Versailles and Saint-Germain. Third, we demand land and territory for the sustenance of our people and settlement of our surplus population. Fourth, only a national comrade can be a citizen. Only those of German blood can be national comrades, regardless of creed. Consequently, no Jew can be a national comrade.
A few days later, they changed their name from the German Workers' Party to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or NSDAP. That Hitler is staunchly anti-Semitic is made undoubtedly clear in his later acts. When and perhaps why he became so radically anti-Semitic is still unclear. His own statements on this, including the description in Mein Kampf of an experience in Vienna, are, like many others, invented because they do not fit with his behavior between 1909 and 1919.
Hitler possessed the gift of auto-suggestion. Impulsive enthusiasm inspired words with whose impetus he himself could be carried away. Thus, he worked himself into a state in which he began to believe things he had originally touched on only haphazardly or for a different purpose. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, from 1932 to 1945, Reich Finance Minister.
Hitler was the party, and the party was Hitler. Ernst Hanfstengel.
Adolf Hitler meets Ernst Röhm, an active staff officer who had taken part in the violent overthrow of the Munich Workers' Councils. Röhm is soon in charge of a Hitler assault detachment. From the end of 1921, the troops form the core of the SA, the stormtroopers of the NSDAP. The task of the SA is to protect political events and provide paramilitary training.
It remains an indisputable law of history that people fail to recognize great movements when they first begin, so I can't really say when I first heard the name Adolf Hitler. In any case, it must have been really early on because our Salzburg was 2.5 hours away by train, sort of a neighboring city of Munich. Stefan Zweig.
I heard about Hitler for the first time in the year 1920. I read several essays by him, which I very much admired. They were completely to my taste. My interest in Hitler was awakened. Karl Wahl, civil servant in Augsburg, later provincial NSDAP leader.
Hitler, the party leader, was a homo novus. Nobody really knew where he came from. Albert Krebs, member of the NSDAP from 1922.
Hitler is unmarried and has no friends. He has no assets, and he doesn't take any income from the party. Investigative Division 4A, Munich Police.
At a protest rally on Königsplatz in Munich on August the 16th, 1922, Hitler speaks with other leaders of nationalist unity movements. During the rally, the SA appear for the first time in public as a paramilitary formation with their own flag. Numerically, they're barely noticeable, with fewer than 800 participants compared to the 30,000 armed men of the other parties.
Because right now, here in Munich, a movement is starting so strong that all young, powerful, and healthy forces are attracted to it. It is the National Socialist German Workers' Party. To make it absolutely clear, we're anti-Semites. Ilse Pröll, later Ilse Hess, from 1921 member of the NSDAP. Letter to her former college teacher.
Diary, October the 29th, 1922. In Italy, the fascists have seized power via a coup. If they keep it up, this is a historical event that could have incalculable consequences for the whole of Europe. Harry Graf Kessler.
The March on Rome in 1922 was a turning point in history. The very fact that it could be done gave us a big boost. Adolf Hitler, monologue in the Führer's headquarters.
For Hitler, Il Duce was a role model. Rachele Mussolini, wife of Benito Mussolini.
Speech at the National Club in Zurich, August the 30th, 1923. Things either take their course, like in Russia, or end up like in Italy, with the dictatorship of Mussolini. Adolf Hitler.
I heard Hitler's name for the first time in a pub on Alexanderplatz in Berlin. A customer was talking about the Bavarians. They're real men. They're the right ones, workers and real Germans. His neighbors protested, but the supporter of this man Hitler kept insisting, "I'm speaking as a German and a worker." Ilya Ehrenburg, Russian Jewish writer.
Actually, the seeds were already sown in 1923. The mass rallies, the storm battalions, their own newspaper, the swastika. Apart from Himmler and Goebbels, the core of the coming leadership of the party. Karl Alexander von Müller, acquaintance of Hitler.
When the first party congress is held, the Augsburg SA is well represented. At this first public presentation, I get the impression that this has substance. We are not alone. The idea of the fatherland is growing. Karl Wahl, Augsburg, former SA member.
The orator Hitler is still flirting with his future role.
May the 4th, 1923. What can save Germany is a dictatorship of national will and national resoluteness. This raises the question, is the right personality present? Our task is not to look for that person. He is either delivered from heaven or not delivered at all. Adolf Hitler.
On April the 23rd, 1923, Adolf Hitler climbs up the Obersalzberg for the first time to visit the author Dietrich Eckart. He spends the night in the Moritz guest house. The owners of the guest house are supporters of the movement.
Letter to Clara and Fritz Hess, July the 15th, 1923. Fortunately, Hitler is now often in the mountains recuperating. It's really unusual to suddenly see him in lederhosen with exposed knees and in shirt sleeves. Rudolf Hess.
September the 18th, 1923. About 9:30 we set out. Weber and I sat behind the Führer in the car with cocked pistols in hand, ready to act at any moment. We arrived in Berlin at about 2 a.m. I'm thankful that I can remember that he pointed out the palace and the parliament and said to me,
Graf, when our swastika waves above these magnificent buildings, I'll be the Führer of all Germans.
Ulrich Graf, Adolf Hitler's first bodyguard. My belief in Germanism had not wavered for a single moment. But my hope, I confess, had reached a low ebb. With a single blow, you have transformed the state of my soul. The fact that Germany gave birth to a Hitler in its hour of greatest need is proof of its vitality. Houston Stuart Chamberlain, British racial theorist. Letter to Adolf Hitler, October the 7th, 1923.
The German economy collapses. In August 1923, hyperinflation sets in.
Everything is getting worse. Famine. A loaf of bread, 140 billion. Then reduced again to 80 billion. Famine everywhere. Käthe Kollwitz.
In the evening, to the Spechts. In the summer, for the worldwide performance rights to all Mahler's works, Alma Mahler got 250,000 marks. On a day when a tram ride cost 300,000 marks. Arthur Schnitzler, Austrian writer, diary.
The national associations overestimate their own strength and believe that parliamentary democracy is at an end.
The writer Ernst Jünger in the Völkische Beobachter newspaper, September the 23rd, 1923. The real revolution has not even begun yet. It is marching forward, unstoppable. Its banner is the swastika. It will replace words with deeds, ink with blood, the pen with the sword.
Interview with the Daily Mail newspaper, October the 2nd, 1923. If a Mussolini were to appear in Germany, then the people would fall on their knees and worship him more than Mussolini has ever been worshipped. Adolf Hitler.
A large revolt from the right in Bavaria with Ludendorff at its head. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia.
Report of the regional government of Upper Bavaria, Munich, November the 9th, 1923. The day before yesterday, Hitler promised General von Lossow and Colonel von Seisser personally that he would not undertake anything. The answer to this word of honor was given last night when, with pistol in hand, Hitler extorted a declaration in favor of a national dictatorship from General State Commissioner von Kahr, General von Lossow and Colonel von Seisser. At the same time, the ministers present were taken into custody by Hitler's people.
In a voice trembling with emotion, Hitler shouted,
"The national revolution has begun. The Bavarian government is deposed. A provisional government will be formed. Please stay calm, otherwise I'll put a machine gun in the gallery."
Ernst Hanfstengel.
Remain calm and level-headed. You've all got your beer. Hermann Göring, former captain, SA leader.
Hitler presents his suggestions for new governments in Berlin and Munich and mentions Erich Ludendorff as Führer and chief with dictatorial power over the German National Army, he asks the already drunken audience,
"Do you accept this solution for the German question of a greater German state?"
Then, as the crowd shouts its agreement, Hitler proclaims,
"Morning will either find us with a national government in Germany or find us dead."
November the 9th, 1923. The dreadful revolution was 5 years ago today. The Kaiser was pensive. He was really interested in news of the new national government in Munich. Sigurd von Ilsemann, adjutant to Kaiser Wilhelm II, Doorn, Netherlands.
The revolt is intended to put Munich and Bavaria in the hands of the revolutionaries, and then, with a march on Berlin, to topple the democratic system. The putschists are counting on defections from the army in Bavaria and the Bavarian police. These, however, fail to materialize. The only major success of the revolutionaries is the capture of the district army headquarters under the command of Ernst Röhm. In his wake marches a young man with metal-rimmed glasses, the 23-year-old Heinrich Himmler, an unemployed agronomist. On the morning of November the 10th, 2,000 revolutionaries, some armed, marched from the Bürgerbräu beer hall through the center of town to Ludwigstraße at Odeonsplatz. Ten years later, Munich, November the 9th, 1933. Amateur film of a tradition that actually dates from the year of the seizure of power, the annual march of the old fighters of the NSDAP to the Feldherrnhalle. Leading the column, as in 1923, are Adolf Hitler and Hermann Göring.
Report of the local station to Federal State Police Command. At 12:30 on November the 9th, 1923, Police Station Vorstadtmitte 2 was deployed to Theatinerstrasse to defend against an advance by Hitler troops. The police had just arrived when wild shouting and screaming began on Residenzstrasse. I hurried around Feldherrn Hall with my squad and noticed that the counterattack of the Hitler troops had penetrated our post. As we attacked our opponents, we were met with mounted bayonets and loaded rifles and pistols. Michael Freiherr von Godin, Lieutenant, Federal State Police.
We retreated to Café Stephanie. People soon came in and said there had been a skirmish on the Odeonsplatz, and the enormous crowd of Hitler men turned and ran away from the state police. Oscar Maria Graf, writer from my life.
"15 revolutionaries, 1 bystander, and 4 policemen die in the Hitler coup of 1923.
The Munich Putsch marks the definite end for Hitler and his National Socialist followers. New York Times, November 1923.
On November the 12th, 1923, Adolf Hitler is sent to the fortress prison in Landsberg. He is given cell number 7. The leaders of the putsch are put on trial for high treason in the main lecture theatre of the Central War School on February the 26th, 1924.
Report of the Württemberg emissary, March 13th, 1924. I attended one of the hearings myself. I was upset to see how the observers, who you could clearly see were mostly from circles close to Hitler, used every opportunity to show their support for the accused. Karl Moser von Vilseck.
Evidence from witnesses and discussions last 25 days. On March the 27th, 1924, the accused give their final statements.
Letter to Clara and Fritz Hess. Hitler's final statement enclosed. It is one of the best, most powerful speeches that he has ever given. Even those in the courtroom who weren't particularly friendly to Hitler were deeply moved. Rudolf Hess.
The verdict is handed down on April the 1st, 1924. All of the accused, with the exception of Ludendorff, are found guilty.
Later, in dinner conversation, Hitler repeatedly made fun of the Bavarian government for putting him into Landsberg prison and then setting him free, instead of executing him. He left no doubt that he would have done the opposite and taken drastic measures. Fritz Wiedemann, war comrade of Hitler.
Adolf Hitler is sentenced to a minimum of 5 years in prison and ordered to pay a fine of 200 gold marks. In his 13 months in Landsberg prison, Adolf Hitler begins the transcript of his manifesto Mein Kampf that portrays his alleged journey through life and development as a politician and sets out his worldview.
Hans Frank, lawyer, participant in the Putsch. He once told me over dinner that in prison he read whatever he could get hold of: Nietzsche, Chamberlain, Ranke, Treitschke, Marx and others.
Landsberg was my college at the state's expense. I recognized the long-term validity of my ideas from the history of the world and of nature. Adolf Hitler.
His small room was full of books, newspapers, and magazines. There was a manuscript on his desk that he seemed to be working on at the time. Wilhelm Laforce, member of Shock Troops Hitler Division.
Letter to Ilse Pröll, Munich, June the 29th, 1924. When I brought him tea this afternoon, he insisted that I stay to listen to his text revisions. Rudolf Hess, Landsberg Prison.
Adolf Hitler writes Mein Kampf during his confinement in Landsberg prison in the year 1924 and continues in the months after his release.
So I decided not only to clarify the goals of our movement, but also to draw a picture of its development. With that, I also had the chance to give a representation of my own development. Adolf Hitler, forward to Mein Kampf.
Letter to Ilse Pröll, August the 4th, 1925. The Tribune believes he can finish his book by next week. I don't think so. Rudolf Hess.
The biographical parts of his book are to a great extent exaggerated and unverified. However, his political goals are deadly serious. His view of the world is voluntaristic. He sees it as he wants to see it. Hitler's political gospel is derived from a primitive Darwinian idea of a struggle for existence. It reflects the permanent fight for survival of all against all, transferred from nature to human society. This struggle is a selection process in which so-called high-quality races have a better chance of survival. At its head is supposedly a white person of the Nordic race of Aryans that Hitler glorifies as the founders of culture. Like most anti-Semites before him, Hitler believes in a Jewish race, disguised as a religious community. He sees Jews in history as being parasites in the bodies of other nations, and as contaminators of the blood of the Aryan race.
For hours, the black-haired Jew boy waits to ambush the unsuspecting girl whom he pollutes with his blood and thus steals her from her people. With the same hidden agenda, destroying the hated white race with the inevitable resulting bastardization. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Hitler develops the caricature of an alleged Jewish conspiracy that has as its goal the extermination of all Aryans. This paranoid hidden conspiracy theory alleges that international Jewry devised Bolshevism and global capitalism in order to destroy the Aryan race. In another chapter, Hitler drafts plans for territorial living space for his Aryan German nation. The concern about a people without space is out of date in the already broadly industrialized society of the German Reich. In nationalist circles, however, it is still popular.
We are stopping the endless German movement southwards and turning our gaze towards the land in the east. If today we speak of new land in Europe, we can primarily only have in mind Russia and her vassal border states. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The first edition of Mein Kampf is published by the NSDAP's EAR publishing company and runs to 392 pages.
Diary, October the 14th, 1925. I am finishing Hitler's book. With great excitement. Who is this man? Half plebeian and half God. Is this really Christ or just John the Baptist? Joseph Goebbels.
The few authors who really took the time to read Hitler's book mocked the pompous style of his writing, his so-called prose, rather than dealing with his political program. Stefan Zweig.
In the year 1945, the US military psychologist Gustav Mark Gilbert interrogates Rudolf Höss, the commander of the Auschwitz concentration camp, in his prison cell.
To find out where the anti-Semitism came from, I asked him how he had arrived at his anti-Semitic views. He said for years he had read Goebbels' weekly editorials, as well as Rosenberg's The Myth of the 20th Century, and of course, Hitler's Mein Kampf. Gustav M. Gilbert, Nuremberg Diary.
On November the 23rd, 1923, a ban had been issued against the NSDAP. All of the party's holdings were confiscated, the administration in Munich shut down, and the party's newspaper, the Völkischer Beobachter, banned. During his imprisonment, Hitler allows the party to disband so that no rival can fill his post. Ludwigslust in Mecklenburg. This German federal state is an early stronghold of nationalist power. Hitler is not directly involved in party politics while in prison. Members of the movement link up with other nationalist forces, presenting them together as one single list of candidates in national elections on May 2, 1924. The list performs exceptionally well in Mecklenburg-Schwerin, where it gains 21% of the vote. The positive results convince Hitler to take power in future by legal means.
Report of the Württemberg Emissary, December the 20th, 1924. The State Supreme Court has now overruled the appeal by the prosecution against the decision of the District Court, thereby granting probation for the remainder of the sentence. Karl Moser von Vilseck.
Hitler's remaining sentence of 3 years, 333 days, 21 hours and 50 minutes is waived, according to the pedantically exact court records.
I don't know any other city as hospitable as Munich. Everything would have been there to enjoy if there had not been one person too many. The man from the Bürgerbräu beer house had been released from prison. Friedrich Hollander, German composer.
Diary, January the 14th, 1925. At the end of the month, Hitler wants to call for the re-establishment of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The only thing to do. Joseph Goebbels.
On February the 27th, 1925, Hitler re-establishes the party. The Social Democrat Friedrich Ebert has been the elected president of the German Reich since January 1919, following a line of kings and kaisers that goes back hundreds of years. In the Weimar Republic, the office of the president is powerful. The Reich's army appears loyal to the Republic and its president. But large segments of the population are not happy with an elected president at the head of the government.
4 months of rehearsals in Berlin. Cut off from the outside, you experience world events only marginally, like when an orchestra musician is given sandwiches by his wife wrapped in the midday paper. Oh, Friedrich Ebert is dead. Hindenburg has been elected president? Friedrich Hollander, German composer.
We have a nanny. She comes from a small town in the north, where residents tend to be really nationalistic. She's just been there on holiday. When asked what people there have to say about Ebert's death, she answered sadly, "Never have so many champagne corks been popped in our town as on the news of that death." Alfred Kerr, theatre critic.
In the first round of elections for German president, on March the 29th, 1925, Erich Ludendorff is the candidate of the newly formed NSDAP and other nationalistic groups. He only receives 1.1% of the votes. When Paul von Hindenburg enters the race in the second round of voting, Adolf Hitler orders his party to support the aging 77-year-old army general. Hitler is now unquestionably the sole leader of the national camp.
Diary, April the 26th, 1925. Willy's 52nd birthday. At 10 o'clock, the election began. 86 Hindenburg, 28 for Marx, 11 for Thälmann was the final result. In the school building, right and left were united by alcohol and sang patriotic songs. Henrietta Schneider.
Diary, April the 27th, 1925. At 2 a.m., the latest results. Hindenburg with a 900,000 vote lead over Marx. Endless cheering among the masses. Long live Hindenburg. It is one step towards the final goal. No more and no less. Long live Hindenburg. Joseph Goebbels.
The election of Hindenburg as German president divides the Weimar period into 2 chapters. This closes the first, which you could probably, at a stretch, call revolutionary. And at the same time, it opens the second, which could best be described as a moderate restoration. Julius Leber, SPD member of the Reichstag.
Diary, April the 26th, 1925. Hindenburg elected. Is he the man that Germany needs at this time? Is he not too old? Too easy to influence? Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist.
During my visit, I met Hindenburg for the first time. I was shocked by the completely apolitical attitude and mental clumsiness of the man in whose hands the German people had put the power that confers the constitution on the Reich president. A man with a soldierly sense of duty, filled with an honest will to keep the oath on the Republican Constitution. That was my first impression. It also became clear to me that everything would depend on good political advisors, the first of whom had to be the Reich Chancellor, who determines policy. That he was not always granted such advisors, so that he finally succumbed to the whisperings of short-sighted plotters, was disastrous both for himself and the German nation. Otto Braun, Social Democrat, Prussian Prime Minister.